If you're waiting to throw the big bucks at Timothy for a brand new shiny OLED iPad, I come bearing news regarding when it should be released, and so let's delve into it. So I'm sure at this point many of you guys are aware of the fact the next iPad Pro's big upgrade is going to be OLED, and today we have a report from Korea giving us all the deets on when production's gonna begin for these new panels. According to this news source, Korea Herald, we should see production begin in Feb of next year, and LG Display is going to be the first supplier to initiate production of these panels at their plant in Paju, Gyeonggi province. I apologize for absolutely butchering that, but that's a city in South Korea, which makes sense, considering LG is a South Korean company. Anyways, according to this source, this time frame is actually 3 months sooner than initially expected. I'm guessing the initial plan was to begin production in May, and then of course we see a launch at WWDC, but with this news, could we now see a March release? I'm not sure. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. Now these are mere predictions from me, a guy who sits in his room and blabbers on about Apple, but I don't see Apple releasing this brand new iPad Pro in March. Yes, we have got iPad Pros in March previously, and on average, we see a new iPad Pro every 18 months, and so a March release would make sense considering the last model was refreshed in October of 2022, but if you think about it, it's actually pretty rare we get big major product launches at the beginning of the year. I know in the recent past there has been a brand new iMac and Mac Studio launched, but that was primarily because there was a huge overhaul of the Mac range going on, and so I would say those are anomalies. If you look further back in the past, you would notice Apple tends to give us a lot of boring spec refreshes in March, and Apple has a ton of those in the pipeline with the M3 MacBook Air and the M2 iPad Air. Now these won't have new designs or display upgrades, they're just getting brand new chips, and so releasing those in March instead makes much more sense. Also remember, the recently announced M3 MacBook Pro shipped with macOS Ventura 13.5 out of the box, a firmware that was released back in June, even though the product was only released in October, so clearly Apple's fine with producing products months in advance and just stockpiling them. I suspect the same thing's going to happen with these iPads, where they're produced well in advance, and then they're just stored in some warehouse in China till they're ready for release. And especially considering OLED is a new technology for the iPads, I think it's a good thing that Apple's producing these months in advance, because if there are issues, they still have a few weeks to resolve things before people try to buy these. Although it seems that not many are going to be buying this in the first place, because once again this new report highlights that we could see humongous price increases because of these new OLED displays. Specifically, it's mentioned these displays could be 3 times the cost of the displays used on the iPhone, and so obviously Tim's not going to be gracious enough to reduce their profit margins, they're just going to pass on the cost to us with a big fat price increase. Yay! Now this is what worries me about this refresh, because I feel like it's already hard enough justifying the $1,100 price tag of the 12.9 inch when the software's so limited, and things won't really change even if the display now produces inky blacks. Of course, I know there's going to be sheep who throw money at Apple regardless, but I just don't think the OLED display is enough to justify a massive price increase. We've heard this new iPad Pro could begin at something ridiculous like $1,500, and for that price you can find a MacBook Pro instead that comes with mini LED that, yes, might not be as good as OLEDs, but it's still a darn impressive display, and macOS is way better than iPadOS for any productive use. I should emphasize though, leaks can often exaggerate how bad pricing could be for future products. This happens every year with the iPhone, for example, because with both the iPhone 14 Pro and 15 Pro rumor cycle, we heard about major price increases that would shock everyone. And while the Pro Max technically did get a price increase, the regular Pro has stayed at $1,000 in the US, even though the iPhone now has more expensive components like titanium and the dynamic islands. And so there is a chance Tim is kind to us and absorbs the cost of producing OLED displays. But do remember, unlike the iPhone where it has massive competition globally and needs competitive pricing, the iPad is basically the market leader everywhere. When was the last time you heard about a good Android tablet? and so Apple can quite easily increase prices and get away with it. I guess we shall see what Apple ends up doing. Now, for the one guy out there who somehow does not know what OLED is, let me delve into some of the benefits. So this does share some of the benefits we saw with mini LED, like higher brightness and a higher contrast ratio compared to LCD, but of course, OLED does not need backlighting. Apple actually plans to use a very thin hybrid OLED display with a combination of flexible and rigid materials, and so this allows the iPad to be even thinner, because clearly the iPad Pro can afford to get thinner with how structurally integral it is, right? Haha, I'm not looking forward to that. Jokes aside, we know how great OLED is on the iPhone. It gives us deeper blacks, lower power consumption. I'm sure these displays are going to look great. And yes, I meant to say displays in plural because we also know the smaller size won't actually be left out and will indeed get the OLED upgrades. So hopefully this means there are no longer any differences between the two sizes and they once again have feature parity. Anyway, Apple wants around 10 million OLED panels for this iPad Pro in 2024 and LG is going to supply 60% of them and the remaining amount's going to be produced by Samsung. Apparently they'll be focused on producing the smaller size, and I know there likely won't be any differences in the displays, but we all know Samsung's the king of OLEDs, and so this in a way is an advantage for the smaller size, which is great news for us 11 inches. That sounds wrong out of context. Anyways, apparently LG Display has actually been facing a setback financially, so they're betting on these OLED iPads to recover their business, and currently final pricing for these panels are being finalized between Apple and LG Display and Samsung, so let's hope Timothy can secure a cheeky discount and the price hikes for us aren't too bad. Of course, I know what you're saying at this point. Enough about OLEDs, let's talk about some other changes. And so fair enough, there are a few other details we've heard about. Let's begin by pointing out the obvious. It should get the M3, wow, no one saw this coming. But yes, it should have better performance, but more importantly does bring ray tracing to the iPads, which should make this the ultimate gaming machine with the gorgeous OLED display. I know some have also theorized that we could see M3 Pro in this iPad because Apple actually sort of downgraded that chipset and gave us fewer performance cores, which could point towards it going into some sort of fanless mobile product, but I don't see that happening, guys. It would still likely overheat like crazy in a fanless design, and I bet Apple doesn't want to make the iPad's extra chunk to fit in a massive fan inside. It would also be overkill, let's be honest, and so M3 is perfectly fine. Now there is talk about a redesign, but what exactly could they change? The iPad Pro has already peaked design-wise, and apart from shrinking the bezels and giving us slightly bigger displays, which we have heard about, there's really nothing else they can do with the iPads. We need the flat edges for the pencil, so they can't really alter the body as well, but apparently there is going to be a new Magic Keyboard that makes it look more Mac-like, with an aluminium inner shell, but I do worry about how expensive this is going to be because I'm sure any sort of redesign for the keyboard's going to massively increase the price. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.